Jihad Watch. Every Thursday, Robert Spencer joins us. He's the man behind Jihad Watch and the author of so many wonderful books. And we never say exactly where he is because, you see, the religion of peace is so bursting and bulging with tranquility and compromise and understanding, they'll try to cut his head off. How are you, Robert?
Just great, Michael. Thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. Now, this is fascinating. I did my monologue about this yesterday. Tom Holland in the UK, Channel 4, the first people to give me work in TV when I was just out of university. I wrote a series for Channel 4 TV called The Outsiders, and one of the people we featured was here's the circle forming, was Salman Rushdie, who shortly after that, of course, had to go into hiding. Now, in this case, this is a documentary about Islam, a very scholarly one, where he concludes, as with many other historians, including you, that Muhammad may not have existed as we know him, that Mecca's only mentioned once in the Quran, and Islam was really just a product of an emerging Arabic empire. He's now being threatened. He's being threatened by individuals. He's very frightened. And, of course, mainstream Islamic organizations are saying, and this is great, he should not have been allowed to broadcast this because we disagree with him.
Well, you know, Michael, it's just par for the course. This is exactly what happened with my own book, Did Muhammad Exist? That covers a lot of the same ground and comes to many of the same conclusions. Really, any neutral and objective historian who looks at the historical evidence for the life of Muhammad, the historical evidence for the existence of Mecca as a trading center at the time that it's supposed to have been that for Muhammad, and that is such a central point of Muhammad's biography, that they'll find essentially that there's nothing there and that this was all created later. And this is it's simply a matter of historical investigation, and historical investigation that of the same kind that has been carried out for centuries with Judaism and Christianity, with nobody getting threatened, nobody getting killed, nobody even being denounced or demands that he be censored. But Islam is a very brittle culture, and they cannot take any criticism, so that even in the West now, any kind of dispassionate historical survey, such as what Tom Holland has produced, creates this furious reaction. And I think it's instructive and illustrative on one key point here, Michael, and that is that they're charging Holland with some sort of hatred and bigotry, when actually he's just a historian who's following historical leads. And it's exactly the same thing that they've done to us. Now, we have these widespread reputations because they've been doing it to us for years. Tom Holland appears to be taken aback by this, and that he doesn't seem to have expected it. But it's illustrative for the public that everyone who says anything that is remotely critical of Islam or jihad or Islamic supremacism, or even just questions the canonical story of Tom Holland has done, is going to be charged with hatred and bigotry. But there's nothing to it. It's just a tactic to try to silence it.
Yeah, I have read this man. His book, was it Rubicon, about ancient Rome. His books about the ancient world. He's a Cambridge historian. This is important to emphasize. He's a lefty. I mean, he's on the political left. As far as I know, he's an atheist. He's certainly secular. The same, of course, was true of Salman Rushdie, of Kurt Vestergaard, the cartoonist in Denmark. But in Holland's case, he made a show in a series that aired on Channel 4 that really investigated all great world religions and was far more critical of Christianity than this one was about Islam. We every year, I mean, normally at Christmas and Easter, just to be really kind to Christians, we'll have some sort of state broadcaster giving us an anti-Christian documentary. Nothing happens. One intelligent critique of Islam. And putting aside the death threats which he's received, it's that Muslim organizations have said you had no right to air this. And Channel 4, because they're lefties as well, believe me, I work there, they're wondering what to do. They're feeling very nervous. Should they buckle? Should they apologize?
I expect they will. But, you know, Islamic law forbids any negative speech about Islam or the Quran or Muhammad, which, of course, presumably would include historical investigations that wonder whether or not he existed. And so what we see here is essentially the demand by Muslims in the UK that Sharia be enforced by Channel 4 and by the relevant authorities. And unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be anybody in Britain who's willing to stand up to this.
Now, there's a meeting here with Sohail Khan, John Esposito, Karen Armstrong, and Tariq Ramadan, who's coming to Canada, by the way, which you've written about. This is a Muslim Brotherhood front?
Yeah, the Islamic Society of North America has admitted ties to Hamas and to the Muslim Brotherhood. It was named an unindicted co-conspirator at a Hamas funding trial, the Holy Land Foundation trial, in 2007. And the Islamic Society of North America was actually named in an internal Muslim Brotherhood document that said that the Brotherhood was dedicated in the U.S. to eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within as one of its allied groups. And yet at this group's annual convention, this highly unsavory group with links to the Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, you see these supposedly moderate Muslim figures and supposedly Islamic scholars speaking. Suhail Khan, Tariq Ramadan, John Esposito, Coren Armstrong. Suhail Khan is probably the most egregious because he is supposed to be a conservative Republican. He's, of course, a notorious ally of the notorious Grover Norquist in the United States, probably the leading enabler of the Muslim Brotherhood to high positions of influence in Washington. Mm-hmm. And yet it's amazing to me how open and brazen this is, Michael, because imagine if it were a group on the right that were connected to all sorts of unsavory things on the right. The outcry would be immense. But these people show up at the ISNA convention and nobody pays any attention at all, nobody minds.
Well, Coren Armstrong, for those who aren't aware of her, probably most people aren't, she's a failed nun. She couldn't cut it as a nun, she couldn't cut it as a Roman Catholic, and so she now writes books that are extremely hostile towards Christianity, and Christians react by saying, okay, that's your point of view, we disagree, that's the end of it. But she's, I suppose, a useful idiot now. She's being used increasingly by the... But look, Pat Buchanan, I mean, I like Pat. I like him personally, and I think he's an interesting man. Some people disagree with him. He was effectively removed from much of mainstream media, even MSNBC. He was removed from there because he wrote a book merely saying that the United States was changing demographically because of immigration.
It's remarkable, the double standard. You know, I'm not a fan of Pat Buchanan, but I understand your point that Coren Armstrong, John Esposito, these people can hobnob with people with incredible links to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, yeah. And that's just fine. But somebody writes a book that questions the cherished pieties of the left, and he's out altogether. I mean, really, it's the same thing that happens across the board and happens to us. Yeah. It's a long-standing practice and program to demonize and marginalize everyone who gets off the politically correct reservation.
But you're still here, Robert, and you will be with us every week. I guarantee you that. Thank you, my friend. You take care of yourself.
Thank you, Michael.